All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Garrett Morgan Career Panel. Tonight, you'll get an insider look at the industry and potential career paths. My name is Alferina Winardi, and I'm the Director of Operations at MTI. As requested by the teachers and students who cannot participate in the session live, we will be recording it. The link to rewatch will be made available soon. Tonight we are joined by Andrea Mosqueda from Adurra and Billy Riggs from the University of San Francisco. Andrea is a project engineer with over 7 years of experience. She has contributed to and led design efforts for civil, transportation, stormwater, and structural engineering projects in California, including several large-scale infrastructure projects. As an active member of the American Society of Civil Engineers, Andrea has advanced the profession to professional and K-12 and also college student outreach. Our second guest is Billy Riggs, who is also an MTI Research Associate. He is a professor at the University of San Francisco and the director of the Autonomous Vehicles and the City Initiative. He's an expert in the fields of automated mobility, future transportation, urban technology, and sustainable urban development. Billy has authored over 100 publications. Welcome. We are excited to have both of you here. I'm going to start with my first question to Dr. Riggs. Billy, could you please tell us about your career path and why you chose it?
Yeah, thanks, and thank all of you for being here with your evening. This is one of my favorite things to do is talk to young people about their journey. And I have two kids that are about your age, and I was on one of the top three teams last year for this program. So I advised one of the top three teams. So I'm super stoked for your competition this year. So and kind of you know why I think if I look at kind of my career path and why I chose it, I was really interested in science and math growing up, and I loved learning, and I think if you love books and reading, but you also if you love just love if you can't get enough of learning, um, and you love, if you love science, you love reading. I think transportation is a really good field for you because one of the things that that is unique about transportation that I didn't know and nobody ever talked to me about early on in my life is that transportation is really easily accessible. And so I discovered that a little too late. Nobody really ever talked to me about transportation, that it was a field early on. And I actually discovered transportation a little later on in life. But yeah, I guess when I was in high school, people talked to me a little more about civil engineering and about medicine. And I really loved a lot of these. I loved biology and I loved engineering and I loved physics and chemistry. I loved a lot of these other disciplines, and I did a lot to learn about just as much as I could. And I think for you, learn as much as you can about everything and about kind of as many disciplines as you can. And that's only going to help you. And I think that helped me be kind of this person that can think about a bunch of different solutions in the transportation space, but can think about how all these things work together as like complex urban systems, and that how transportation works with the environment and with water. And I think maybe Andrea sounds like she's works on kind of water systems as well as transportation systems, and that's so important when we think about things like what we call complete streets,
Mm.
where we have water that has to run down into the ground off of our roads. And that's there's stuff that sounds simple, but it's a really complicated system in terms of our environment. And again, like I said, when I was a kid, that stuff we didn't really talk about that much in school. And so I guess as my career developed, and as I went through high school and then college, I started finding out about this stuff. And I actually went into the Coast Guard. And that's when I first started to learn about, oh, there's this thing. I graduated with my master's degree in urban planning, and I started to hear, oh, this thing, transportation engineering, oh, transportation planning. Oh yeah, there's this whole field that's dedicated to keeping people safe when they cross the street and keeping making the bus arrive on time. And oh wait, there's technology involved with this. And oh wow, isn't that technology cool? And I actually had a project that was all about timing the helicopters to so we could rescue stranded surfers that were out like getting lost in the ocean near Maui. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, that's transportation. Wow, crazy cool. So, you can do a lot in transportation that you don't think is transportation. And so now what I do is I stopped I stopped doing this professionally and I started teaching people in college about 15 years ago, which sounds crazy. I've been a professor for like almost 15 years now. And I stopped working as a professional civil engineer and I went and now I work as a consultant. I do consulting, but also I teach professionally at college. And so I teach, if you go to university and you come to University of San Francisco, I'll teach you in engineering or in business or in urban planning. So that's what I teach at University of San Francisco. And I used to teach at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I used to teach it actually at San Jose State, where Alvarina is as well. So I've taught at a couple universities in California. And I love to talk to young people at various different places in their education. Um, and Yeah, I think I'll stop there, Alvarina, because I've kind of answered that question maybe a little too thoroughly.
Yeah, we'll get to other questions after this, but I'll also ask Andrea the similar question. How did you get started when as an engineer, and did you always know that you wanted to be an engineer?
Sure. So I think my story is maybe a little different than most. I've met a lot of folks whose dads were civils or grandfathers or uncles. They had some sort of kind of familial tie to the industry. But I really wasn't exposed to engineering growing up. Elementary school, middle school, having internet still wasn't really that much of a thing. You might have access at school. And even what was on the internet, there weren't as many resources as there are today. So, if you're on TikTok, there are civil engineering pages where you can learn about what civil engineers do, right? Those things weren't available, I think, to me when I was growing up. So I had heard the term engineering, but didn't really know what it was. And I also really enjoyed math. I didn't really like science, but I did like math. And so that was just kind of one of the careers that was always just kind of brought up in conversations with teachers, like, oh, you should consider being an engineer. But again, I didn't really know what it was. And at one point I think it was at the end of 8th grade, I took one of those aptitude tests that they just kind of had us take at school. And so, they asked all the questions and, I really liked math, but I also really liked like interior design. I used to watch a lot of HGTV, Trading Spaces. And so I really liked that design aspect as well. And so that kind of, the result of my test was, okay, look at engineering, look at civil engineering. And that was the first time I heard about civil engineering. But I did a little bit of research at that point and it kind of drew my attention. And so kind of at that point, I was like, okay, let's do civil and, just kind of continue to take the classes. And when I got to college, I kind of decided right away that that's what I was going to major in. But I will say, kind of to Dr. Riggs' point about not necessarily being exposed to transportation. When you get to college, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself. So that is something that I do want to recommend is you might go in thinking, I'm going to be an engineer for sure, right? But take all the classes, take risks. I know when I went in, I didn't take my material science class until senior year. And I wish I had taken it freshman year because I really enjoyed material science and I probably would have switched to that major if I had taken it earlier on. But yeah, definitely, take all the classes you can so that you can, really find something that you're passionate about. And yeah, I mean, honestly, once I got into industry after I graduated, I kind of learned that hardly anything you learn in school you really use in the industry. It's more of kind of learning to think like an engineer and solving problems, and how do you define the problem, and then how do you solve it? Those are the things you learn in school, is how to kind of think like an engineer. And then all the technical stuff, like I didn't really know what transportation engineering was, really even water resources engineering when I started working, but you just kind of start picking stuff up as you start, working through your career. And so now I'm, pretty familiar with both, which is great. But yeah, if you love to learn, I think that's definitely a really good kind of quality to have, because you're never gonna stop learning, especially as an engineer. That's super important, to continue to learn, to grow, to be curious. So if you consider yourself like a curious individual, I think it's definitely kind of a route you might want to take.
Oh, that's great. And so now that you two are, you are in the transportation industry, but you kind of have very different roles. Andrea, you are a professional engineer, and Billy, you're no longer a professional engineer. You are now mostly teaching. So, what does an average day look like for each of you?
I can go first. So every day is a little different. But for myself, within civil engineering, there's all the different disciplines. There's transportation, water, structural. But even within those, there are different types of work. So someone might do inspections and report writing, or someone might do strictly design, someone might do plan checks. So it really is different for everyone. For myself, I do a lot of design. So my day to day, typically, I work from home. I'm pretty fortunate in that regard, but, I check my emails a lot to see, okay, what is being asked of me. Sometimes a client might come and say, hey, this project's in construction and we have found this conflict. Can you help us resolve it? Right. So that means, okay, now I'm going to pull up the plans. What is it that we designed? What's the conflict? And so I'll work with my team a lot. There's a lot of collaboration in engineering. And so whether it's through Teams or email, or sometimes it does require we meet in person as a team, to figure out what the solutions are. But I think in a more like specific sense, I use Civil 3D, which is a tool on the computer. It's, drawing lines and shapes to communicate what it is that the design is. And so if I'm either working on a new design or making a change to a current design, I'm using the technology to communicate that. Once I figure out what this design solution is, typically I'll have to send it to a supervisor to do quality control. That's also very important in engineering. Wait for any potential comments, respond to the comments. And it's just kind of that for a lot of that, just kind of figuring out, okay, what is it that I need to design it, get it reviewed, send it off, and just working on the next thing and the next project and the next project.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. What about you, Billy?
Yeah, so it's a little different. So a day in the life of a professor engineer. So professors can wear multiple hats. So a professor can wear a professional hat and a teacher hat at the same time. So many times I'll be juggling multiple things at the same time. So I'll have either a consulting project or a research project. So you have to be really, and I think this is really good in today's economy. One thing that's a really good attribute for all of you to kind of develop is to be, and I actually think it's really hard. Um, um, and I'll say why it's really hard, because, well, I'm not going to say why it's really hard. You have to be really, you have to really be a self-starter. So you have to actually really motivate yourself to start your work without your parents telling you, without your supervisor or your teacher telling you. You have to be able to get started with your work without anybody supervising you or telling you to do something else. So if I have a project that I'm working on, I have to get started with it. And I have to come up with, so many times, all the ideas myself and all the resources myself. And if I actually have, for example, a research project, I have to come up with all the ideas myself. And like I have to come to Alvarina and I say, I got this great idea, Alvarina. Hey, do you and your colleagues want to do this? And like, so Alvarina and I have this cool project right now that we're gonna do. We're gonna tell you all about in September. And actually that's something real. We're gonna tell you all about this cool project that all of you are gonna you're gonna love. All you kids, you're gonna love it in September. And you actually are gonna love it because it's all about you guys. It actually is about you guys. You're gonna love it in September because it's got Minecraft written into it. And I can't tell you more than that right now. Um, but um, but like it's really about like from a lot of research and a lot of consulting that I do on engineering project. It's really about getting up in the morning and you spend a couple hours working on engineering projects or working on things for a little while, whether or not it's writing a book or it's actually working on a traffic model or something for a few hours that or a research project that may be like working with a company like Waymo on some data or things like that that maybe that just maybe just kind of an issue that they're interested in, and you may be working on that for a couple while for a little bit, and then you just got to put it away because you have to run over to another place and work on and teach a class, and then you have to do some grading, and then you have to do so you have to do a lot of switching, and then a couple days from then, you might actually have to run over to a conference in Berkeley. And then the next week, you might actually have to go teach a class in Belgium, which is actually the kind of like the real life story of me, which is last week I was in the Netherlands teaching 26 students. So as an academic, you have to be very flexible in terms of how your life adjusts to changes. It's not a very stable is not a very stable job. You have to be like someone that really likes a lot of change in your life and in your schedule. So it's not like something where you go in every day or even you stay home every day because your schedule changes quite a bit, and it's very irregular. So for me, for my personality, I think my wife calls me the engineer Energizer Bunny, or she calls me, if you like Winnie the Pooh, I'm like the Tigger character. So I'm like the one that's bouncing up and down all the time. So if you're like that kind of student, and your mom and dad should say, be a college professor, but you have to understand the trade-offs, and that college professors don't get paid as much as like engineers for Google and Facebook. But you get one thing that you should always remember: being a teacher, you get summers off. So you get summers off.
That is true. You get summers off and then you get winter break. So
Yes. And summers off mean you get a lot of time to spend with your family. And so that is what you get. And so the one thing you do get is a lot of flexibility in your schedule. So I get to spend a lot of time, and your parents, many of you probably get a lot of time to spend with your parents, and spending time with your parents, they really value that. So
well, okay. And after we talk about the day-to-day, we also some students would like to know what is the most difficult aspect of your job? And I think Billy, because you do a lot of autonomous vehicles research and also consult, why don't we talk about that a little bit more? What's the most difficult aspect of that technology at this point in time in your work?
yeah, yeah, I think the most difficult, that autonomous vehicles are a really interesting. Um, it's a really interesting time in this idea of transportation technology, because realistically, the technology is really advanced right now, and I think you as students should know that we live in a really unique place on the planet. And you all should understand that this bubble, the Bay Area that we live in, is a really special place. Like you all are living in a little microcosm. I'm assuming we're all here in San Francisco Bay Area. This is we are in a really special ecosystem, and you should really appreciate that. It is I think the biggest challenge right now is trust. There's a lot of yeah, I think there's a lot of trust issues in kind of the technology beyond the Bay Area bubble. And there's this interface between the technology and the hardware because right now there's a lot of people that have built machinery and hardware for a long time that want to keep on building machines the same way they've built them for the last 300 years. And what's we're seeing this play out in our economy right now with the politics we see right now in these tariffs, and that and then a lot of the even the legacy companies, the automakers right now are not wanting to kind of like they're not wanting to shift over to kind of producing software driven vehicles. They want to keep on producing vehicles that are really hardware based. And so the challenge is when we think about producing technology based vehicles, we're still seeing a lot of the vehicle hardware providers wanting to produce vehicles that are basically more or less hardware defined vehicles rather than software defined vehicles. And the irony is that Tesla is one of the companies that's right in our backyard that had a software defined vehicle, but you know they're not the leader in terms of a software defined vehicle, and the leader in terms of the software doesn't produce hardware. So we have a little bit of a mismatch here in our region between a hardware company and a software company. And so the unfortunately our best company that was doing that was Cruise, and they had a problem last year. So this is a big conversation that I wish I could have on this call, but all you students will have to talk to me about this in another forum, which we can have at another time, because this is an awesome conversation. But yeah, the biggest challenge is really this trust between the hardware and the software, and it's really a point of conflict between the car companies and the software companies.
Well, that could be an idea for a future MTI webinar.
Yeah.
What about you, Andrea? What's the most difficult aspect when you think about designing large-scale infrastructure project?
Yeah, so in my role, we primarily design infrastructure for public agencies. And so it's very rare that we get to implement new technologies. We typically just kind of have to go with what's tried and true because, you know, we want to make sure it lasts. We kind of leave the testing and the kind of proving of the technology working to kind of the private side, development side, because they kind of have the funds, right, to take those risks. But we do use technology. I talked about, you know, Civil 3D, which is the CAD software we use, which is also constantly changing, and we just kind of have to adapt to those changes as well. But I think for me, what I see as being difficult is I mentioned earlier about kind of my job is to define the problem and then solve it. And as you know, kind of in the real world, you don't always have the problem design. You don't always know what questions to ask. You don't know, you know, all of the little kind of things you have to think about when you're designing a project. You have to consider the people it's going to be affecting. Is it equitable? What materials are you going to be using, especially now when we want to strive for infrastructure that's sustainable? And so it's just kind of figuring out, okay, what questions do we need to be asking, and then developing kind of the approach to find the answers. So when you're in school, you know, you might be given a problem, and, you know, in the word problem, it kind of gives you all of the information, right? It tells you the quantity or the measurement or especially once you get to college and you start working on problem sets, you have the givens, and almost always you're kind of given all the givens, and it's still difficult to work through, but for the most part you kind of have everything at the ready for you to pull and use to find the answer. In the real world, that's not the case. You don't have any givens, so you have to figure out, well, where am I going to find this information? What technologies am I going to use to get the answer? And that requires a lot of, Dr. Riggs talked about taking the initiative, right? And so you have to take the initiative to do the research, go online, go on forums. You might want to talk to colleagues that you work with. You might want to talk to colleagues that you don't work with, that are just in your network, that might have experience in a problem like this. And so it's just learning how to use all your resources to help you solve the problem. It's fun. Trust me, it's a lot of fun. But it can be challenging. Sometimes you kind of get stuck and you're at a dead end. You're like, I don't know how to move forward from here. And so it's just kind of keeping at it and talking to as many people as you can, or, to get that help to help you solve the problem.
Yeah, I think referring back to what both of you talked about is also, staying curious. That's a very important thing to do. We are unfortunately running out of time, but we have one question from one of our teams here. So I do want to ask this before we leave. This is for Billy. As you have worked on autonomous vehicles and city planning throughout your career, what is one experience that really changed the way you think about developing environmentally stable city?
What's one question sorry, can you repeat it again?
What is one experience that really changed the way you think about developing environmentally stable cities?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that's really kind of made me really reflect on the kind of the future of well, I I think I've been thinking a lot about the future of the Bay Area and growth, and I've been thinking about how we do it without transit and without and in the context of autonomous vehicles, one of the things that I've always been inspired by autonomous vehicles is the idea of how shared automation can fit into of the future of public transit. And so, as I've studied autonomous vehicles, one of the things that inspires me about automation is this promise that autonomous vehicles can fit into this idea of future transit networks. And they can fit into this idea in a different way than traditional public transit has, in a way that potentially can be more cost effective and actually more efficient. And that's a way that could open up more opportunity for housing development. And when we think about the Bay Area, the biggest thing we need to do, and one of the things that I'm been the most challenged by recently is thinking about the Bay Area as a home for climate refugees. And I started to think really radically about this Solano County project, California Forward, about it in a different way. And this project in Solano County, a lot of people have kind of haven't been negative about it because it's way far out in the Bay Area. It's a greenfield development. It's a project that we would traditionally call unsustainable because it's very far away from what has been traditional urban development. It's very far away from where we have developed before. But when we think about the traditional places that have been developed in the Bay Area, when we think about the places that are sustainable on the planet, the Bay Area is one of the most sustainable places on the planet, and it will continue to be so in the next 100 to 200 to 300 years. And there will be increasingly fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer of those places. And that's the unfortunate truth. And the fact is, we need to be prepared for mass migrations to this location from places like Bangladesh, from places like from Southeast Asia. We need to be prepared for welcoming new neighbors to our neighborhoods, and I want to be welcoming many more people to this part of our world, and I think we need to be prepared to build much more housing up and down the peninsula, in the East Bay, in the South Bay. And so I think we need to radically rethink where we need to be building housing, and that actually involves rethinking transportation, and it involves, I think, autonomous vehicles. So it's a very long-winded way, but I think a way of answering the question, but it involves maybe a lot of urban planning, but also automation. So, Andrea, I don't know if that has any ideas that you want to talk about, but it's something I've been giving a lot of thought to some of this.
Yeah, I think your point about transit real fast is really important. So I think, an experience for me is I feel like I have to drive everywhere, right? And I don't want that to be the case. I want our public transit to improve. And like you said, I think autonomous vehicles, it's going to be a way to make it more cost effective. Kind of get us to, that first mile, last mile, which is really important in transit. So I'll kind of leave it at that, but.
Verena, I'll say one more thing for the students here is that we do a lot of work with Waymo, and so students we have a research project with Waymo right now, and so Waymo are the cars that are here in San Francisco, and if you haven't been up here and tried them, get your parents to download the app and come up and try them. It's really cool, and take a ride. And it is the future. I think it's really cool, and it's so safe. I think the first city on the planet that bans human driving is going to be that is the future, and it is. We should not be behind 2,000 pound, killing machines. I'm just going to say it. I don't think I should be driving, and I don't think you should be driving either. It's Driving should be something we do on a track with a big helmet. It's called Formula One. That's what driving should be. And it's fun. It's a lot of fun, but it's something we do on a racetrack. It's not something we should do for commuting. And but it's great to be driven around. It's fantastic. And but when you're driven around, you can be driven to transit. And so we are now researching how Waymo is giving people incentives to be driven to transit. It's really cool. So Waymo did this pilot where they gave people transit incentives if they get picked up at their house and then get dropped off at a transit station in the south part of San Francisco. And I can't share the results yet, but I'm sure that the Mineta Transportation Institute will be some of the first people to hear about the results of this surveys that my students will be doing, and you all can learn about this too. So
well, we look forward to that.
The Minecraft stuff is so much cooler.
And that too. Thank you so much for being with us here tonight, and special thank you to all of our guests and students. I hope you have taken some inspiration away from this discussion. If you would like to be informed of future competitions, future research projects, and cool webinars, you're welcome to sign up for our newsletter. It's available on our website. And we would love to have you participate in our 2026 Garrett Morgan competition. Right now on our screen, you'll see some of the important dates. Hopefully, we'll see you in the next competition. Thank you, everyone.